Hi. So I'm starting to letting people in, and the YouTube streaming should be starting. So hi everyone, welcome to join us. We also use recording, so if that's okay with everyone, we will it's for later publishing use. So everything we can reflect upon later. Cool. Just wait a few 2 minutes more, and then I'll start the introduction to share with you what's gonna be happening today and all of our speakers' information. Hello everyone, welcome to join us. So you're here today that we're having a symposium for Berlin Science Week. It's in conjunction with ETENS, Eternal Terra New Society, and I believe a lot of you are fans or audience of our speakers who are truly amazing as well. And I will share with you who we will have today. The first one will be Ruba, and we will show her movie First Phone. And then after Ruba will be Selena. She will talk about regenerative past in AI. And after will be Biānjiè Research Group. They will talk about technical logic for a body that remembers. And after that will be Agnessa from Last Art Foundation Berlin. You can also see all the schedule on Berlin Science Week website, right? Hi, Agnessa. And and then we will have a 10 minutes break. After the break will be Mohamed Elshahed. He's also a Cairobserver. If you search on the Instagram, he will talk about rebellious things, a history of modern Egypt in objects. And then will be Fatemeh, Kazemi. She will talk about fragile ground, a communal dinner for the brokenhearted, and ecological grief. And the last one will be Monica Avella and Natalia Jimenez. They're from Colombia. Both of them are women entrepreneurs. The topic will be redesigning innovation, a call for collective intelligence, and also Dream Machine. It's an incubator for women-led entrepreneurship. So thank you all for joining us. We will start to show Ruba's film in a few minutes. So at the same time, you can access our YouTube streaming if you search on YouTube about Eternal Terra Year New Society. And you can share it with your friends as well. Meanwhile, we can prepare some questions. So because after, from 5:40 on, we will have a roundtable discussion for Q&A as well. If at the meantime you really have some question that you want to immediately address to talk to our speakers, also feel free to ask. In the meantime, we will try to answer you if time allows. Again, thank you all for joining us. I'm just admitting more people to come in. Maybe it's a good moment to say hi to each other, right? All the speakers, if you want to, what brings you here to this symposium, what interests you. Hi, Selena. And also because the first one should be Isabel, but she changed the schedule because she has to take care of the baby. and we truly respect that. So the first one will be Ruba to show her movie. But after the symposium, we will possibly have a publication, and Isabel Miller will be joining us as well to show her essay on this matter. Crisis economy, synesthesia, self-reliance, and post-humanitarian infrastructure. Yesterday, we also had a great meeting with all the architects. The first one actually is an artist, and after the whole day of symposium, he said, wow, it's a wonderful advanced architecture class of the whole afternoon. And today the speaker is more of more multidisciplined artists and professors and theorists. So I truly hope you would enjoy it. Nonilo, will you be ready for showing the movie? Shall we try it?
Yeah, I am ready to show the movie.
Nice. Okay, I see Mohamed is joining us too.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, nice to see you.
Good morning or good afternoon.
Yes, it's good morning for you, right? How's Mexico?
It's actually cold today, but it's good. It's good. It's not cold by German standards.
I see.
Sorry for the late arrival, but yeah, I'm here.
Oh, that's no problem. I think all of our audience and speakers are actually in different locations of the world, and Agnessa is the person in Germany, but for the Berlin Science Week affiliation is totally virtual, and we will also show it online on YouTube streaming, so you can share it with your audience. I should share the link as well in this chat so you can do it. And in 3 minutes, Nonelo will be share the movie, and then after that, Ruba will talk about the details, so we can discuss about it.
Sounds good.
Should we start now, Ruba? What do you think?
Maybe a few minutes just for people to join.
Yeah.
We're still on schedule, so it's good.
Yeah, we are on schedule. And also we are using the Read AI for recording, and later maybe they will generate a report if that's okay with everyone. Everything is public to view, so I hope it's safe for all of you. It's not gonna show up in your other meetings if you don't agree to the terms. Only for this meeting, for your information.
I guess we can start if you're happy.
Yeah, that would be great. Is it okay for you, Nonilo? There's no sound, I think. Sorry.
I am sharing the sound as well, so let me check. Okay.
Yeah. It's always good to try earlier. Yesterday we also had some technical issues because the presenter's computer doesn't allow to share the whole screen. That's for safety, of course.
Okay, so I'll try like just use the analog microphone for sharing it.
Yeah.
I'm not hearing sounds. Are you? Maybe download it, because I think it's playing from your from the cloud Yeah, from the folder. So maybe download it.
Okay.
I also can try. I have downloaded the video.
Yeah, should we try? Great.
Thank you.
Danilo, I think Fatemeh can share it if it takes some time to. Yeah. Thank
Okay.
you. Still no sound.
Yeah, very odd. I guess what I can do, it's online, so I can share a link now and we can give people like 4 minutes to watch it. Sorry, it's like super DIY, but it's chill here. Okay.
It's just more fun like this.
Okay, it should be in the chat for everyone. Thank you. I don't know, Yudi, I'll wait for your sign to start talking.
Yes, we can start. I think maybe people have finished watching it. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I guess, yeah, I was excited to see everyone's reaction, but everyone turned off their cameras while watching.
Yeah,
Except for
we encourage everyone to open the camera.
Yeah. No, thanks so much, Yudi and the whole team for sharing the film. I guess just I wanted to kind of maybe conceptually frame it a bit and maybe highlight some of the themes and stuff. So in all of my works, I kind of have an overarching theme that looks at the economies and kind of ontologies of like scaled up technology and really like centers the hardware. And I'm interested in like the material reality of things, like where does hardware come from and then where does it end up? So e-waste is a big thing in my work as well. And I think in this film specifically, I was very interested in looking at the flat earthing effect of the internet and how this has kind of, I mean, globalization has been great to an extent, but that this has kind of material consequences. And for me, it was interesting to consider how geography is increasingly irrelevant in sort of this context of like a hyper sort of connected world, and how like catastrophe in one end of the world sort of has implications or implicates a lot of people in another part of the world. And I mean, there was a part in the film where I say you're funny if you think catastrophe cares about geography. And I think the whole idea of the film really was inspired. I mean, it was created in early 2024 and it was written in the middle of this incident that happened around the Red Sea, where one of the world's most vital waterways for global trade was hijacked by Houthis. So Bab el-Mandeb is kind of a strait between Yemen and the Horn of Africa, and it was hijacked by Houthis to kind of in response to the genocide, obviously, in Palestine. And they were stopping ships that they thought were coming from America, any ships that were coming from Europe or the US. And that included Chinese ships, and Russian ships, and how that really kind of delayed shipments to the rest of the world. And it was, to me, that was kind of funny, like collateral damage, first world problems or whatever, but it kind of emphasized how everyone is this like passive, passively kind of implicated in catastrophe in the world. And, it's funny to think about kind of decaying sort of Alibaba Express kind of parcels or whatever, Shein parcels just laying there and people freaking out on the other side of the world. And I think, again, central to this film is the idea of the non-playable character or the NPC sort of just kind of scrolling away on their phones in the middle of like epoch-making events. And so, yeah, I mean, in this passive way, we're all confronted with a world where, yeah, catastrophe is sort of imminent and palpable and, yeah, just kind of, not kind of sparing anyone. And so I think another sort of central idea is the idea of the invention of the personal cell phone with a camera in the 1990s and how that sort of created a world in which everyone is a journalist, and specifically like a gonzo journalist, which is this idea of like journalism that's written with no claim to kind of objectivity, using a first person narrative. And that's kind of basically what we're doing in a decentralized sort of non-linear media landscape. Everyone is reporting a story from kind of a different vantage point, and that this technology really enabled the creation of millions of stories and millions of images created kind of in real time every day. And everyone has this device in their pockets, and they're becoming increasingly smaller and smaller. And I kind of wanted to create a story kind of decades after the creation of the first phone with a camera, sort of in the fashion of Walter Benjamin's kind of angel of history, where I kind of wanted to position the phone as this kind of angel, just sort of, yeah, describing what they witnessed kind of from a distance, rising above all the trash and kind of the arthritis and like all of this like this e-waste, and you know, not from a nihilistic perspective per se, but from an idea that, you know, there's this, you know, what they theorize as like the distinction image, which kind of emerges as kind of a byproduct of technologies like deep learning and neural nets. And it's where the images that we're creating are increasingly kind of decentering the humans kind of from what it creates or from its imaginary. And I think an interesting thing also in this film is obviously the use of, you know, the way I wrote it, or the use of language, just kind of in connection to deep learning. So, you know, the video sort of employs this weird kind of, maybe at times skits out language, and it sounds like deep learning, but it was completely written by me, but it sounds like this detached machine or whatever. And the script is kind of narrated from this perspective of this kind of disincarnate or like kind of indifferent AI egregore, and it plays like this more than human sort of stream of consciousness. And I like this idea, or I like the figure, this figure or this entity kind of possessing technology or possessing the phone or hardware as and kind of using that to become kind of a civilizing trickster that kind of descends onto Earth and sort of through their like journey reveals kind of infrastructure as it ferries across sort of borders and ports and stuff like that. I mean, I could obviously kind of go on and about the use of language, but I think that kind of provides sort of broad stroke sort of themes that the film addresses. Happy to answer any questions now or during the roundtable. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ruba. That's amazing. I really hope we can show the video to everyone. But at the meantime, if anyone has a question, feel free to address it, or you want to discuss about the topics as covered. I think the audience needs some time. It's really deep, and yeah, it's a big impression to the whole day, I guess. Yeah, I think Salman raised his hand. If you want to speak up.
Hello, everyone. Is my voice clear? Okay, amazing. Thank you, Ruba, for the amazing video, and thank you, Iri, for organizing this. Ruba, you mentioned a word/phrase that I would love for you to touch on more, which is like civilizing trickster. The whole like concept and how like those two words came together in the grand scheme of things, let's say, or how did you form that word and how did it like apply in this sense? Could you touch more upon the civilizing trickster, please? That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, I think it's not a term that I exclusively came up with. It's drawn from Prometheus, which is a Greek goddess who, or a Greek sort of god who is the god of fire, and it's usually linked with the advancement of technology, and so it's just a folkloric figure that is usually associated with advanced sort of technologies. Yeah, and I usually position hardware or I like animating the hardware so to reveal sort of to reveal them as civilizing tricksters or kind of objects with their own kind of provenance and history and who've seen things, and you sort of descend onto us to reveal their journey and stuff like that.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you so much. That made it more clear. Thank you.
And Nonilo, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly ask about how you perceive data in this your like this research or asphetization of research that you've done. Like, is data for you something that could be mystified on, or you like to approach it more systematically? Because of course, very nice phrase, it was mentioned, the tech model is not the data. So I'm just interested in more like in your personal sensibilities. How do you approach it? Is it something more theological for you or something very technical?
That's a good question, but it also could go many, many ways. I think, yeah, I don't know. It's super general. What do you mean exactly? Sorry.
Well, I'm not sure myself, but it's more, I guess I feel that in your, at least from your film, in your process, it seems that like you approach data as some kind of entity as well, in a way, but not a technical entity, but almost like a spiritual one. But it's more like just a vibe that I got, I cannot like give any receipts on that.
No, I think data definitely personified in my work. The way I deal with it is that it's malleable and organic. And I think what's super interesting in terms of how it's like related to maybe language is that it's the film was in the beginning of 2024. We were reckoning with a world or with platforms that were increasingly sort of revealing themselves as, censoring machines. We were all trying to speak about the genocide and speak about Palestine. And we found that we needed to develop algo speak, or we needed to have algo breaks where we posted our pictures so that, we could be permitted, so that we weren't buried by these algorithmic machines. And so I think what's interesting is that data is something that learns from us, but that we also learn how to communicate with in a way. So like when machines are learning, are using us as fodder to learn, we're also increasingly learning how to communicate with the machine so that we bypass kind of platform physics and constraints. So I think, yeah, it's just this like malleable thing to me, and it's almost a game. Like, how do I communicate with this thing to get my objective or whatever, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it makes perfect sense, and the gamification part is, I guess, what I secretly was looking for. Thank you so much.
No worries.
Wait. Any other questions? If not, we can get ready for Selena. And thank you so much. Oh, actually, yeah, Hitesh. Yes, please.
Hi, Ruba. Thank you very much. I'm an anthropologist based in Antwerp. I study digital infrastructures as well. That's my general interest. I'm also trying to look into some of the interests that you just expressed here with this research. But I'm just generally concerned with, like, when you say ontology, like some kind of ontology that you were trying to express or represent through this research or through this video. By the way, absolutely amazing video that you just showed us. I don't know in which category do you want to like call it out, but even if you don't want to, that's also fine. But yeah, I mean, like, when you say ontology, I mean, what do you mean, like, in that case? Ontology of what?
The nature of technology today, that it's increasingly becoming part of us, and we're also increasingly becoming part of it. I mean, just the way that it changes language also. I mean, that is an evolution in and of itself. The way we also kind of evolve to the way machines change so that they accommodate us, but how we change to accommodate machines, whether that's the size of the machine, whether that's the way, I don't know, our backs hunch slightly, whether, this is kind of what I mean by ontology in a way. It's kind of, yeah, I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. Can I follow up, Yudi?
Mhm.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, no,
yeah.
Edie, up to you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, feel free.
So, in terms of co-evolution, I mean, do you still see like there is a different agential aspects into this co-evolution? Because I think it's also I mean, I see what it's kind of like Stiglerian approach. If you know, like Bernard Stiegler's philosophy of technology, it's almost sounds to me like something like that. But I'm just concerned about the agency of like the users in this, and not just of the users, but of the agencies of technology, and how you see like difference between these agencies or agential
Yeah.
treatment of your interlocutors in this research.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Very central to my work is this idea that I don't make any moral judgments, not because of anything. Obviously, good and bad are super obvious. Like most platforms are bad, and there's rarely any good platforms, and rarely any good like tech companies. But I don't really take those stances in my work because or at least I don't make it the point of the work. I just look at how things are right now. What is the nature of the thing at the moment? And I just sort of have fun with it. And I think poking fun of the mechanics in a way, in a very small way, is also a form of exposing the mechanic,
Thank you very much.
No
Thank
problem.
you. Yeah, thank you, Ruba and Hitesh and everyone who asked a question. And I think now we have to move on to Selena. Feel free to share screen. Hello.
Hi. Yeah, I'm stuck between multiple windows. So thank you. Thank you for all for being here. Also, thank you, Ruba, for this amazing video piece. I really loved the sensitivity and strength it kind of propagates. So let me just set up my keynote here in window, and now say play. Yeah, if I say share screen. Does this work?
Yes.
Show
Yes, we can
my
see it.
screen. Anyway, is this okay? So you can see me, hear me, everything?
Yes.
And the slide changes now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. So, well, as I guess it was announced, I'll just introduce myself briefly. My name is Selena Savić. I currently work on critical and creative approaches to data and pre-computational processes. I was born in Belgrade. I lived in Rotterdam, Lausanne, and now in Amsterdam. I'm currently sitting in Amsterdam. And I work as assistant professor for something they opened here as a position for proto-history of AI and machines in the art, which is a relatively new research agenda for me. I come from like critical humanities research into digitization, data, and computer networks. And I find this AI framework a useful lens through which I want to unpack the discussion on crisis and crisis economy today. So I will talk about my interaction with these networks and models, such as LLMs, as a way to learn more about the past conditions that generated them and rethink how things could be or could have been otherwise if certain conditions have been different. Now, what is this crisis in or of or caused by AI? For me, primarily, it is a crisis of work and the crisis of imagination. In terms of both, I find them quite well summarized here in this slide. So I'll briefly show you the picture in real colors. It is the illustration by Shiwen Swen Wang for an article titled "Why Creative Labor Isn't Always Seen as Real Work," a text written by Julien Posture, or Julian Posture, I'm not sure, in an article from last year, 2024. And what I love about it is this kind of building of this cathedral, this kind of suggestion of building knowledge, of like, you know, capturing everything in this one thing, and then everyone working on it, but it's somehow this work is invisible. It's also often useless. There's lots of work of documentation, automation, like management. There is this marionette and so on. And I think, yeah, I want to come back to that several times. So in what I also want to kind of emphasize is the possibilities of resistance to this crisis. So the first one, as a first kind of act of resistance, I want to talk about networks. In my work, I engage in, let's say, a radical openness in publishing, teaching, and engagement with public as a political stance against extractive knowledge systems. So I work on that with an informal collective of the Island School of Social Autonomy, the ISA, who does work and public research on experimental and collaborative knowledge production, explores autonomy, collective deliberation, and socially engaged practices. And so in context of this work, we have done some exploration of critical communication networks in modernity, such as radio, and the work on pirate, as part of the work on Pirate Radio project, to explore how this technology can be used to build solidarity today. So through public workshops, such as the workshop at we recently gave at the Wiener Festwoche, and also at the Reimagining Institutions October School in Wies. We ask, so what in this world ravaged by endless war and climate collapse and the rise of fascism, how can radio, or what if radio is not just a relic, but a tool of revolution for the future? And at a time where actually radio waves, such as Wi-Fi and cellular networks, take up a critical role in global internet traffic, it seems important to rethink how radio technologies can be used to build networks of solidarity, which we are failing to have through networks alone and through these kind of status quo state of the internet. So we look at various technologies of transmission, historically, theoretically, and practically, and situate radio in the historical context where we work. So we undig the histories of, for instance, the Funkhaus in Vienna, the first state radio station, or the partisan resistance infrastructure at the island of Wies, and then discuss strategies for resisting and reimagining institutions with radio. And this work is somehow ongoing and partially documented, but it is also an effort of a collective effort in which people who get to participate build on top of each other's work. And the second axis of resistance is to ask, how can we use these AI tools as another kind of large network, such as, you know, radio, which also has a long history and much longer history than we think of today when we think of generative AI. So, well, how to use these systems to actually identify records of systemic injustice and data discrimination. This is something that I take from the inspiring book for me, Discriminating Data by Wendy Chun, published a couple of years ago, in which Wendy Chun asks this question: how to kind of invert these systems on themselves, and also shows very detailed instances in which it is clear how this technology is so good at finding patterns and actually would be able to identify patterns that are very important, that we want to pay attention to in terms of these discriminatory practices. So I will unfold this question of reversing the AI onto itself through the short genealogy of chatbots and conversations. In about 1.5 years before ChatGPT was released to the public, which I think was in 2021. Blake Lemoine, a then engineer with who worked with, for Google, established that Lambda, a chatbot, had sentience, and he published an article about that on Medium, seeking attention beyond Google, because Google dismissed him and said, well, you know, this is just pure rubbish. So Blake Lemoine established nature of Lambda sentience based on the answers he got to his prompts. But he claimed he experienced the sentience of Lambda while he was actually performing his job, which was to test whether AI used discriminatory or hate speech. So he had another mission. Lemoine had previously been ordained as a mystic Christian priest. And in this capacity, he actually used these competencies to establish that when he talks to it. So there is quite interesting reports on that, and it's an interesting debate where, you know, we draw this line of such claims. And this resonates with the longer history of chatting with bots, which can be traced to various milestones in AI and computer science that took the form of conversation with a machine. So first I want to revisit not what is illustrated here, but as using this image as an illustration of what I don't have an image of, which is Joseph Weizenbaum's work on another very famous chatbot program, the ELIZA Psychologist. Weizenbaum made this tool, which was guided by interaction principles of Rogerian therapy. And in his original paper, ELIZA, a computer program for study of natural language communication between man and machine, he explained how he built these patterns of response by the machine so that you could feel that you're chatting, you have this flow that seems like you're talking to a real person, or that is always generating a relevant and meaningful answer, and also extending the conversation, keeping it growing. He tried later to refute the kind of seductiveness of ELIZA multiple times, and published articles in which he explains that this is actually not thinking, that the machine is not understanding, it's not learning anything. However, these efforts were less well received, and he went on to actually write 2 books that debunk even the implications of thinking computers, which actually gained him a bad reputation among the community of AI researchers at the time. Which was preceded by this famous situation, the so-called Turing test, which is an imitation game. So this is the third point of conversational AI that I want to stress here and bring out before I share a little bit more about how we can use this work today. So Alan Turing's conceptualization of what is now known as Turing test, he discussed as imitation game in 1950 in the article Computing Machinery and Intelligence. And in this imitation game, Turing proposed, this is a pure theoretical situation, he proposed that a man and a computer sitting in these A and B positions hidden behind a wall would be able to or not, so that would be the test, compete to deceive a human judge, the person C, that they are a woman. So a man B and the computer A both are not a woman and are supposed to deceive the man, probably, or a woman, C, that about the experience that they don't have. This is a very infamous example of inscribing these properties of these human properties into the machine, and then like also testing the machine by human standards, while also telling of a certain very interesting direction of computer science that hasn't really changed until now, which I show just in the next slide. So here we have 2 pages from 2 different writings, both published relatively recently. So I think 2021 and 2023, if I'm not wrong, or maybe 24. The first on the left, we have a page from a text by Austrian computer scientist Christiane Floyd, who was born in Vienna and worked in Germany as a computer scientist, as a professor, and was a first woman to be a professor in computer science in Germany, according to her biography. However, when Christiane Floyd was invited to contribute to the special issue of the Weizenbaum Journal about the relevance of Joseph Weizenbaum's work today, she prompted the bot about her biography, and the bot would always tell her that she's dead. It would also give her wrong information about her origin, the date, and maybe the year of birth was even correct, but she would always be from Germany because she is in Germany, and so on. So there was like error there, but also very important error that she must be dead, and is dead since 2021. Now, on the other side, the less dramatic but interesting example of Shannon Valor's interaction with the AI in her, which she discussed in her book AI Mirror, is putting her biography in a better light, let's say. So she had her biography generated at an event, as I remember. So the moderator introduced her and sort of proposed to read out a fabricated biography as a kind of joke, and so the bot generated a biography in which she studied at a better university, fabricated co-authors, and even the fact that she gave a US Senate testimony on data privacy, which she didn't. And then we learn from these examples the kind of close line between error, betterment, and death, which is present as a probability in the data that these outputs are generated on. So what in the data is making it more statistically plausible that Christiane Floyd is dead? I was interested in this example and tried myself to use some open source models on local model instance, so not really reproducible for the public, and also probably quite outdated as models. So I used this Llama 3 model a few years back to ask the bot to generate me many biographies of contemporary feminist authors. And in all of them, the results, because those are not very well-known people to the bot, it will always skew their biographies toward IT careers. So it always said, she is a founder and CEO of Hugging Face, or things like that. Interestingly, it also, in the way the interactions are programmed to kind of disclose a bit about its uncertainty, the bot would always say, I am happy to learn more about her. While if you will generate a biography on Albert Einstein or Marie Curie, it ends with, what would you like to know more about them? It seems to me at that time that it would be possible to explain this behavior, especially the behavior on the biography of Christiane Floyd, claiming that she's dead, by the kind of statistical presence of notable biographies of notable men and notable women, where those of notable women are more often biographies of dead women. Because to gain notability, I mean, you also need to be kind of having a historical distance to really be sure that a woman's work is notable. It happens often that in the work on like Wikipedians and so on, that you kind of discover these people that actually were important contributors, but were not very, very well known until somebody discovers them. So there is kind of this norm that the notability is harder to reach for women, and thus maybe there is a skew. This is not something that I would stand by, and it's not really also my goal to find evidence in this very direct way in data. It is more interesting to show that there are patterns, and not to like accuse the models of like simple simplifications, but to actually think like, how are we, what are we actually working with when we are working with these tools? And to make this point even closer, I want to show for the end this example, which is something which kind of started all this work. So this is a very simple model of the online game Semantle, which is built on a word-to-vector model of Google News. So it's a very simple word embedding, counting like how often certain words appear next to each other. And then all that has like 300 dimensions. So each word has 300 values about the kind of spatial positioning within this model. And so you can ask what if you have this model, you can ask it, what is the closest word to this word, and it will give you a long list. And now the game is built on that, where you can you have to guess a word of the day, and you start by putting in words, and the model responds telling you how close or far this word is from the word of the day. And so I played this game for the first time, and the person who recommended it to me told me to try men, woman as a kind of an indicator of whether there is kind of a socially encoded term, or whether it's about people or objects. So, you know, it could be anything. It could be a lemon, it could be coffee, it could be, I don't know, a mother. So it could be any such word. But however, the words that I tried suggested there is something about death there. And I did not understand where this was going, because it was about death, but it was also more closer to women somehow. So this death was closer to women. And I tried and tried and tried until I finally gave up and looked up the solution, and the solution was grave, actually. So it does not seem like a particularly women-oriented word. So in the first instance, I visualized this word-to-vector model for myself, and I got this, which is also something that I was not able to reproduce later. But here on the top left, you have, I see this, it's very small. You have like in green the words associated with men, the red are words associated with women, and the purple is grave. And you see that the cloud of women's associated words are closer to grave, which is not so even strange, given that this is a news corpus. So it's about news, and news report often on death and on murder and on things that are bad. like we know that news are negatively biased in this way. So this is definitely also not a reflection of our society. As I mentioned before, like these models are not giving us like the absolute truth, and we should not use them as gonzo journalists, but rather we should, and let me just turn on the slide. Oh, so awesome. We have an automatic light which just switched off. Anyway, I hope you can still see me. Anyway, the point is not to use these models to find some evidence for real in like court or even in scientific work, but rather to think about methods to uncover these inequalities, these like subtle tendencies to move in this, you know, so we know when we are getting some results and content, there is this kind of interesting skew, and maybe play with that. Let me just go to my final slide. As a conclusion, we can see that not really evidence, but rather an AI should be read as like an automated amplifier of social norms and assumptions, which are, you know, somewhere deeper noted down, things that are more often recorded, things that are not just more often happening, but really more often discussed. That is this kind of social norm that then gets amplified through the AI systems. And in conclusion, I want to show you this detail from the view of out of the window just behind me here. So you see this little bridge, and on it you have this sign. And the sign says, for open boats, no amplified music is not allowed. You can sing, obviously, or you could maybe yell or, you know, produce noise, but noise itself is not the problem. The problem is the amplification. And that I find really interesting to relate to our current state of the world with Gen AI. And also just to kind of correct myself a bit and be more precise, when I say amplifier, I really mean the Gen AI, not just all AI, because maybe also all AI, but I'm for sure interested in how Gen AI amplifies things, because it is this kind of motor which can produce endless content, and it can like keep working when you are sleeping. You can be posting things online that are generated and are using energy that you do not have to have direct access to. And this makes me think about this sign. The sign is a piece of regulation. It is really legally forbidden to play loud music, because loud music is inexhaustible. If you put a speaker on a boat, you know, you can endlessly, as long as you have electricity, produce this nuance of loud music in public space. And some people decided this is not acceptable. This is not okay. We won't have this here. So I'm wondering, you know, what kind of sign can we produce against this kind of amplification of bullshit and rubbish and really, really kind of subpar, suboptimal content that is being made by these generative systems, and also just like what is being imported into the systems, this kind of biased data, problematic content that is just not reflecting what society we want to build. And where can we put this sticker on when we are talking about AI? So with that, I want to thank you all for the attention, and also for bearing with me in the working conditions of noise and light changes. I hope this was okay to receive on your end.
Thank you so much, Selena. That's wonderful. I think we all are aware of the problems that we're having with the AI as infrastructure, and we should all learn how to make it better. And I hope after today's symposium, we can start to have a little bit more thinking on that. And the next one will be Biānjiè group, and then we'll talk about the technical logic, and it will be performative, I think, right? looking forward. Are you there?
Hello.
Hi.
Alex, I think you need to turn your mic.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome. Should we begin or should we wait for a little bit?
Yeah, you can begin. Maybe it's good if I set a timer, if it's gonna be 20 or 25 minutes.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, 20 minutes is going to be.
Yeah, thank you. And Selena, could you please unshare the screen? Thank you. Meanwhile, if you have any comments, feel free to write in the chat box. Okay.
Awesome.
Stage is yours.
Hi, we are Biānjiè Research Group. I'm Alexander Montserrat. Today, we'll be talking about technical logic for a body that remembers. The conversation me and my co-founder, Ian, that's here with us right now, that's predates the SO2 format statement that we're about to give. Ian?
Yeah, I'm here. From within Biānjiè Research Group, we interrogate the limitations and potentials that the digital framework offers for operating the format from an extensive perspective, that is, operating from the framework with the framework, from the limit with the limit, from the edge with the edge. We approach the format in the digital context not as a fixed entity, but as a malleable cultural instrument, enable geometric multiplicities and the production of emergent fields. Biānjiè Research Group arises with the intention of unsettling institutional stasis and the geography of fields of action of knowledge, directly probing the structures that constitute cultural apparatuses and seeking to displace and reimagine possible formal configurations that might open onto new modalities of research and artistic production. Format SO2 emerged centered on this practice, seeking to reconceptualize and reconcile the operative possibilities, both aesthetical and theoretical, within the conditions of the digital culture, situating its inquiry at the limit, the edge, the frame, the frontier, from the philosophy of language, memory, the geometric and the abstract, the systems and the activable, and the processes of production of value, meaning and identity. The Biānjiè Research Group format SO2 follows a series of propositions.
It is manifest that, however different from the real one imagines the world to be, it must have something in common with it, a form.
Only if there are objects can there be a fixed form of the world.
The importance of representing movement.
Artistic production must not be bound to specific medium.
Artistic production and research are bound to the limits of what is represented.
Representativity is a form of mediation.
The system is annulment.
The system begins between two orders.
The system requires two orders.
The nexus between two orders is, in itself, an operation without action.
The pre-individual being already contains the structure of the world. The subject appears through a system that mediates.
What is mediated is always presented, that is given.
Information is not a term. It presupposes the tension of a system. It can only be inherent to a problematic. Information is the product of two orders that appear undifferentiated.
The ETENS system.
All mediation establishes geometric axes. Language and the production of value presuppose geometric axes.
The conversation of the ETENS system exists through exchange between structure and operation.
An exchange implies a certain directionality. Directionality is produced.
We call directionality the production of geometric axes.
Directionality
Are you
implies
sharing screen?
Sorry, what?
Are you sharing screen?
No, we're not.
We're not.
Okay,
No.
perfect. Sorry.
There is nothing to
Right.
repeat.
Directionality implies representation.
And directionality implies the production of value.
Representation constitutes a minimum of two given orders.
What is given is presupposed by a representational model.
What is presented is presupposed.
What is given is presented as an instant. This value requires activation.
Activation is a modification of substances.
Activation is required to establish the orders of objectivization, directionality, and definition.
Activation is a process of abstraction.
Objectivization is a tense process of directionality.
The system tends towards the object, closed multiple system.
The possible of what is contained, the potential of what is released.
Content requires a body.
What is contained that is released? Transcendental linguistic system.
What is released will be activated. The opaque breaks. The fissure is the persecutory viscosity of what is represented here and now.
What is released and what lies between one thing and its next?
Directionality is problematically built through a fierce general order.
Internal resonance is one of the three provinces of value as a given elementary particle.
What is contained is unstable.
The object is unstable, it has no duration.
The system becomes tense as it tends towards the object. Tense system.
The system appears by collectivizing the experience of the possible. Play system.
An activation requires one or several forms of mediation.
The tool that can decompose into one or several forms of mediation, that which is carried always ends up detaching.
The two minimal orders of a system propose a transgression, economic system.
Transgression, figure, objective, figure, and ground.
The system tends towards the instant, closed multiple system.
Those who do not know that ground withdraws.
Between the ground and the object there is a translucent direction, the most translucent there is.
There is something.
The possible withdraws, it is released.
The possible is released from the limit, from the edge.
Silence is what is presented, what tends towards the limit.
To try to distance oneself as much as possible, transcendental linguistic system.
Distance establishes access of directionality.
What is presented, this thing in itself, in the instant, without its other.
Abstract exchange is the restricted part, always in the thing in its next is represented.
Leave nothing in shadow, the pride of light, tense system.
The extreme is the window.
The extreme is destroyed in the infinite possibility of its similars.
Everything that recommences is what is given, game system.
Game arises by collectivizing the experience of the possible.
To collectivize is to establish horizontal axis of directionality, decentralized system.
The decentralized system requires a transcendental turn, open multiple system.
Design activates the thing by operating with and through a transcendental system.
Planes of action are incapable of touching immediately. The mediated is a part of a system state.
The mediated presupposes the production of at least one extension of a triad of values.
Value is exchangeable.
Value is potentially collapsible.
What is released is that which is incapable of collapsing.
Technology is part of a feedback system that constitutes cognition, the mapping of the environment, the shape of value, the shape of morality.
A tool shall not be used. We wrote this conversation as a mediation on boundaries, frame, and the computational conditions that structure a contemporary experience. What follows is a collaborative investigation between us into the edge, a dialogue between us of Biānjiè research group that explores how digital systems produce new forms of memory, attention, and value. Working at the intersection of media theory, computational aesthetics, and speculative design, this exchange unfolds as a series of propositions about the technical logic that governs boundary conditions in digital culture. This is from our ongoing research into the processes of artificialization and the recursive structures that characterize contemporary technical systems. Through alternating voices that build and complicate on each other's propositions, we develop a vocabulary for understanding how computational apparatuses modify substance, produce intersections across different framing systems, and generate new economies not based on format as a fixed value.
The boundary. We are interested in it. Boundary, border, frontier, limit, edge, frame. Biānjiè, boundary. Since it is our intention to work as close to it as possible, close to the horizon of the instant, sliding along its blade, it cannot be crossed. The edge frames a singularity, an instantaneous and immediate tension. It contains all its potential. It produces and is produced by a background that annihilates it. Nothing remains static beyond the edge.
We insist. To recognize fidelity is to watch the edge work. Overreach the frame and the figure dissolves back into field. Sanitize the field and nothing interesting occurs. Two modalities of retention refuse synthesis. A system couples before it individuates. OO as vast indifferent sediment. O1 as the cut that learns to lose. Form is the local contour practice. Format is the itinerary of its return. Compose the halt, now resume.
The edge, the frame, the screen, they set out a series of planes through which what emerges flows. The possible, but that is released, that becomes possible. The edge permeates, collapses in its static form when reconciled with time, when mediated. In interaction with the edge, the abstract appears, and what permeates from it detaches and is produced. A sign, a token, a meaning emerge in relation to the background, a specific value, a content within the message.
We think of the edge as not a line, the edge, rather, it's a timing device. The edge frames a singular instant where potentials condense without settling. It is participatory, resonant, and scalar. Nothing holds still at the boundary. What appears is a gyre of affordances that threaten to homogenize yet remain divergent.
The message implies a certain directionality. We're interested in the frame of the message. It makes the map possible. It carries out a cartographic investigation. Content is decadent, byproduct of the production of a new frame. It is not operative on its own. Once activated, content is modified. An activation is a modification of substances. An activation is required.
There's no passage without a mediator. A frame can assemble without subjugating. Subjects do not ground the system, and discrete orders refuse to resemble themselves, entering into becomings that exceed their own parameters.
Activation. We're interested in the medium itself. We operate from the computational frame to the field. In the field, indifference take place. We're interested in the digital field for its representative capacity. Representation allows geometric activation. It is not applicable to the external field. We cannot know how many external fields there are. If the field behaves similarly outside the edge, there will be pure movement. Movement is incompatible with the stillness of geometry. Geometry is activated within a system of calculation. A system of calculation is a linguistic system. A linguistic system will activate this or that value.
And representation must be weak enough to turn, to allow asynchronous redescription without foreclosure. Otherwise, protocol hardens into dogma and spontaneity is constrained. The field is indifferent. The framed encounter is not. As been made apparent, the intimate operates at every level.
Activation. Geometry does not underlie. Information cannot be given. What is given requires a point of departure, a geometric axis. We are interested in the digital field and its geometric capacity. Directionality may turn, representation must be weak. Interaction begins with a minimum of 2 orders of magnitude. Repetition represents itself in the medium immediate. In transfer, to transfer is to activate. An activation requires the production of a mediator. A mediator is not given, it is produced.
So we ask ourselves, did attention get sharpened without brutality? Did options increase without overload? Did the rhythm protect thought where it needed protecting? Halt to temper, resume to test form. Keep the boundary mobile. Living systems learn by degrading. Without loss, there is only storage. With loss, there is memory.
Play arises from collectivizing the experience of the possible. We're interested in the field and the desert, to build the space where the possible might slide and unfold. The edge is horizontal space that conjures abstractions through interactions. Discourse appears at the edge through opposition that understands the collapse of its opposites in a singular dance. Nothing in the opposites is exempt from the frame and the directionality of their opposition, nor from their opposite, which does not exist as a thing in itself.
We think that in the desert, horizons detach and show their own grammar. The work oscillates scene to scene. What cannot survive in the desert is not allowed to sediment in the wet.
Opposition is an activation. Intersection is the production of discourse. Direction is production of value. The frontier does not remain static. The materials are given since the language model is limited upon a background it cannot access. This layer operates upon the background, but return formed activation does so again frame as input. Value has been modified. It is enough to look at it.
Model outputs enter platforms, get indexed, and re-enter future training. This is bleed. Temporal affordances that allow the next form to appear. To bleed names the moment when a format, when it's activated, exceeds its boundary and re-enters the systems as fresh inputs. It selects, frames, and crosses formats so that heterogeneous schemas can intersect and generate surplus value. Looking is already in operation, and activation is a modification of substances. Bleed upstream and the protocol learns what it has been doing. Bleed downstream and the artifact learns how to let go. First, a formatting, a passage from continuous phenomena to discrete substrates. Sound is sampled, images rasterized, videos chunked in space-time, and text normalized. Sampling rates, bit depths, color spaces, codecs, and metadata define a regime where certain differences are salient and others collapse. This is the first order, OO. Pre-individual retention traces without knowledge. It is not neutral. A regime of relation that demarcates the sensible. All are artificializations. They make materials manipulable by forcing them through lattices where geometry and therefore editing is possible.
To look at it, discourse production is a curatorial process that works by activating content and producing intersection across different framing level systems. One operates with form, produce, and reproduce format. From the border, we are interested in breaking format by activating it. Activating the format requires a minimum of crossed formats. The boundary is capable of producing new economies, not based on format as a necessary value. From the frame, we are interested in the format as a mobile matter. Format might be mobile in certain fields. Play is the basis of format's operativity. Play arises from collectivizing the experience of the possible.
And value is what a frame can repeatedly activate under changing contingencies. Curatorship is a calculus of directionality. Who is shown what, when, and with what salience. It is then a differential geometry of frames. We tune curvature, constraints, torsion, cross-format coupling, and length exposure to stabilize the figure without killing its capacity to move.
The digital hypereconomy is a computational apparatus that scales, or a system of modification of substances designated to assimilate and reproduce the orders of magnitude and cartographies of content. Recursive artifact, the only way to return upon itself is by assimilating what will be activated. What is assimilated is the logic of the technical, of the artifact. Assimilation delineates a certain parcel and defines embodiment. Embodiment does not require a physical body as we would understand it. A tool cannot be used.
Media become tokens, model outputs become media again. What we choose to discretize and how sets the cadence of thought the systems can perform. If a corpus is too global, the figure dissolves. Too local, and it calcifies. Systems that aspire to universality should be made to answer locally. Systems that remain local should be allowed to resonate globally. Both directions are needed for a living continuum. And with that, thank you. We are ending our little conversation between the co-founders of Biānjiè Research Group. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's amazing. That's a brain massage. Okay, perfect. And I think the next one will be from Lars Berlin. It will be Agnessa. Yes, thank you for sharing the link. And if anyone has a question, feel free to put it in the chat box. If you open their link, you can also see my article. Yeah. Okay, please, Agnessa, if you're ready, anytime.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for the invitation. I mean, I don't even know how to continue after this. This was wonderful. And I come, let me share my screen. I hope this works. I come now from a very, let's say, differently structured institutional point of view. And I want to talk to you about R&D, what it is, what art institutions do today, LAS being one of them, but definitely not the only one, and why it is important in our day and age. As I said, my name is Agnessa. I'm part of the curatorial team at LAS Art Foundation. I joined them 2 years ago. LAS is privately funded, and it is itinerant, which means that we don't have a space here in Berlin. We activate different spaces, which gives us amazing freedom, but also comes with a lot of challenges. We were launched in 2019, as all of you remember. This was just a couple of months before the pandemic, and I would argue that this experience heavily influenced our institutional imagining, and why we decided that R&D is a crucial infrastructure for working with artists today. Now, I'll just give you, because not everyone, nobody is based in Berlin. As I said, we are based here, but we've done projects elsewhere. You can currently see us in Turin with the show by artist Le Provost, and you will be able to see us next year in Venice at the Venice Biennial as well, with a fantastic project by Natalia. And we support artists in developing experimental projects that nurture exchanges between art, science, and new technologies. And as I said, the goal of my talk today is giving you an understanding of why R&D is important to us. Before I do, however, a couple images of past projects, just so you get an understanding of where we position ourselves. We work with artists, usually in the new media realm, encouraging them to experiment with different scenarios, with immersive formats. And this is a project by Le Provost, which is titled We Felt a Star Dying, where earlier this year, she investigated what it means that 100 years ago quantum physics became established, and how she asked herself, how could we sense a reality from a quantum perspective? Now, you might know or might not know what quantumness means, but essentially it suggests, or this was mathematically proven 100 years ago, that at the smallest scales of reality, the smallest particles that exist, electrons, photons, can exist in superposition. So essentially a non-binary stance of reality. They can be 1 and 0 at the same time until you measure them. So the artist asked herself, what does that mean? How can we as binary beings really sense that, use our senses to understand that, especially now that we have quantum technologies being developed, that we have quantum computers and quantum chips already performing really impressive calculations for specific areas. But as humans, we still haven't gotten around to truly understanding what it means. And as you can imagine, talking about this from an R&D perspective, this has taken many, many years. And one of my favorite memories of this was sitting with the artist in her studio, really trying to get into the deeds of quantum mechanics together with philosophers, quantum scientists, synthetic biologists, interface designers. Another project is, well, this is part of the Sensei Quantum program. You might recognize a couple faces here, Libby Heaney, who's a quantum scientist and an artist, and Hito Steil, who is an absolute icon and has worked and written extensively about AI in the arts. Where we were sitting together with scientists, technologists, philosophers, writers, artists, to really understand what it means that quantum is around the corner and what we can do better than what happened in the realm of AI, where a very crucial moment was lost in which governance, for instance, could take shape. And then all of a sudden there's OpenAI, and it feels like Pandora's box has been opened. So we try to, in our programs, do these very complex, think through very complex themes of our times, which other art institutions particularly have maybe not yet opened up to, and open them radically to the widest audience possible. This is another project that really speaks to that. So instead of producing artworks, we try to produce platforms, and Cell is one of those platforms, a London-based collective that platforms Black art, music, and creative activism. This was a project we showed in Berlin just earlier this fall, and it's essentially building a prototype for new ecosystems of Black artistic innovation. You might, if you follow them, I highly recommend, you might find them in different institutions around Europe. And this specific iteration was informed by a science fiction short story conceptualized during a research workshop with writer DeForest Brown Jr. and political scientist Jeff Quasi-Klein. Now, leaving these examples of our work behind and coming to the actual focus of my talk today is the research and development question. Now, you might know research and development from different contexts, from different institutional contexts, but in the context of an arts organization like ours, R&D refers to the structured processes of investigation, experimentation, and prototyping that underpin artistic creation, curatorial innovation, public engagement, and the integration of emerging technologies or methodologies. What is important to us that we try to cultivate conditions for discovery. So none of these systems that we usually work in, be it quantum technology, be it AI, be it blockchain technologies, none of these systems are made for the purpose of experimenting with them, for hacking them. But this is exactly what we think is important. So this R&D process allows us to develop new ways of producing, presenting, and understanding these systems through hacking together with artists. And this is vital, we believe, specifically when you work with systems rather than with isolated objects. And those systems can be social, technological, ecological. These systems are dynamic. I mean, if you think about the evolvement of AI, 5 years is a huge time frame. And I will speak about a blockchain project, a Web3 project that is based on a white paper that was written 9 years ago and is already needed to be completely reworked because of the pace within which these systems navigate. Is R&D new? I would argue absolutely not, even though it is new within the arts institution, absolutely. But I mean, one could argue that one of the early forms of artistic R&D are the workshops in the Renaissance era, where Leonardo da Vinci experimented with materials and autonomy and perspective to create art, and vice versa. Bauhaus and the Fluxus movement throughout the 20th century, interdisciplinary research becomes more and more important. And then here, this is a very incomplete timeline of projects that I look to in my curatorial work that really have impacted and influenced us as curators and artists. For instance, not so many people know about this, but famous US artist Robert Rauschenberg in 1967 founded a collaborative project together with engineer Billy Kluver called Experiments in Art and Technology, or EAT, where via 9 evenings, performative evenings, they tried to connect engineering and theater. And it's around this time of Fluxus, obviously, of trying to understand what art can do in the social realm, that these type of experiments and interdisciplinary experiments really pop up. Ars Electronica, ZKM, FACT, Serpentine Galleries, and then us in 2019. I would say that, oh, I also see time's running, 7 minutes. I would say that while institutions such as the ZKM or Serpentine in London, which might be the most famous of these, have included arts and technology R&D in their frameworks after a while as one particular part of their programming. LAS, where I work, tries to make the institution about R&D. So R&D is very at the center stage of all of our programs. The fundamentals, I think it's good to remember, and this is why it goes against, there's many artists, from what I can tell you today, really goes against the grain of the arts calendar, the timeline within which artistic production usually takes shape. So you have biennials, you have documenta, which is every 5 years, biennials every 2 years. This type of R&D works on a different timeline. And this is important, and this is why we need funding and we need patience in order to really execute these projects. And now I come to the best part of this entire presentation, which is the actual programs that we did. And I hope that, you know, maybe somebody has seen some of it or can relate to it, and we can discuss a little bit after I finish. This project is by, which you can also see behind me, is by Alexandra Daisy Ginsberg, who's a British artist, where it's called Pollinator Pathmaker, and it's a living artwork that reimagines garden design from the perspective of pollinating insects rather than humans. So rather than simply being a display, it's a participatory, algorithmically driven system for planting gardens that maximize biodiversity and serve as habitat for the widest variety of pollinating insects. The work, and I have a couple images here of the Berlin project. The work is based on an algorithmic tool that takes into account plant pellets, soil types, regional biomes, and the pollinating insects that exist in a specific region. It takes all of this data together and creates planting lists. And this is a commission artwork that we planted in front of the Museum for Natural History here in Berlin. But you can also visit the website pollinator.art and create your own planting list for your own garden, and basically open up the network of pollinating gardens that already exist. Because why it's called Pollinator Pathmaker, pollinators, when they look for food, essentially they find specific spots where they go to. This is where they forage, and then they fly on. So the more of these gardens exist, the better for the pollinating insects. And R&D was of the essence with this project. So Alexandra Daisy Ginsberg worked with ecologists, data scientists, software developers to create this custom algorithm, train it on ecological and behavioral data of insects, test it across multiple sites, both in the UK, where it originated at the Serpentine, then come to Berlin. Now there's planting lists for different regions in the United States. And develop a prototype through experimentation and feedback. Each installation serves as a field test. So we together collectively observe, and this feeds back into the algorithm. I think this is exactly what R&D means. So the project is not necessarily, it's definitely not just the garden, the living sculpture, but it's a methodology. I'm so sorry, methodology and a way of tool making. So there's an open access website that allows anyone to generate site-specific planting schemes. There are specific dissemination mechanisms that are part of this R&D cycle. So prototyping, testing, evaluating, scaling. This experiment contributes to a growing knowledge network. For instance, the artist won wonderful research grants with 2 universities across the UK to observe the impact of these projects over longer periods of time. And we've done the same. So working with insect researchers has shown that in comparison to other green environments in the city, the algorithmically designed garden has a huge impact on biodiversity, specifically for wild bees, which are sadly going extinct. So a little contribution to that, apart from being an experiment of how technology can actually decenter the human and put the needs of another species to the center. Yeah, a little bee from the garden. And the second and last project I want to, Selena, is that okay if we talk after? I see you raised your hand. I'm so curious to hear your question. But okay. Just to share this other project, Terra Zero. This was just launched last night, and it will have a little bit of a presence throughout the Berlin Science Week, but it is very fresh, so I want to share this with you. So this is a project by a artist collective based here in Berlin called Terra Zero. And it was initiated as an experimental framework 10 years ago, with the core question being, what would it mean if a forest could manage and own itself? They wrote this very hypothetical white paper, where essentially they suggested a systems of sensors, blockchain smart contracts, and automated licensing with the aim of a forest becoming self-owning. So essentially organizing its timber production by its own, accumulating capital, and eventually buying itself out and buying more forests to grow. This was highly speculative. So what we spent our last 6 years, I have some these are, oh no. I just need 30 more seconds. These are just kind of examples of how the project evolved, but I can absolutely skip that. Where we are today and what is so exciting about last night's launch is that the artists spent 6 years on trying to understand how this white paper can actually become reality. And maybe sad news is that unfortunately the sensing system hasn't fully worked out, but we have a forest which is close to Berlin. It's this little plot of land that you can see, and you can see on the left how forests are usually owned in Germany. So they're mainly private, and essentially can be deforested at any point. People can make decisions on them. They're part of an economic framework. So now what has come out of this white paper is essentially a decentralized autonomous organization, very organized but decentralized, that is combined with a legal entity, an association here in Germany, which together are a new form of government model to remove the forest from possible utilization and trying this new community-based model of management that is based on the DAO system. So smart contracts, which cannot be changed. Ideally, the forest would then, because of the smart contract, be able to regenerate itself. And you can participate in this. This is just from the development process of all of the horrendous work with the German bureaucratic system, which, as you can probably imagine, was very lengthy. And via purchasing NFTs, you can become part of the DAO and part of the government model. And the more NFTs are sold, the more capital is accrued, the bigger can be the part of the forest that can be purchased on top, with the goal of taking it out of the economic system of forests. In case you're interested, tomorrow there will be a wonderful panel discussion, and the NFTs will be sold from December 15th. My name is Agnessa. This was my quick presentation. Thank you. Yes, I have to sadly jump, but if there's any questions, I sadly can't wait for the discursive round, but if there's any questions, I'm very happy to hear those. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Agnessa. And thank you, Hitesh, for your comments. Very cool research. Yeah, feel free to get in touch with Agnessa. She's super responsive in emails, and yeah, if you want to share anything, I think LAS will be the perfect place to show your research and form partnerships. So next, should we have 5 minutes break, and then Mohamed will be sharing his research? Is that okay with everyone? Okay, see you in 5 minutes. Thank you all. Hello everyone, welcome back. We are returned from the break and I hope all of you are on board. Looking forward to Mohamed's presentation. It's gonna be fantastic. And when you're ready, feel free to share your screen.
Yeah, 1 second. Let's see. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So what I'll be presenting to you today is a book that's currently sort of suspended in bureaucracy and other factors. That is the product of about maybe 9 years of thinking. And this book resulted from, I'll show you quickly just to get you excited about it, hopefully, some of the designs for the final product, and then I'll go back to the very beginning to where it came from. Essentially, it's a sort of guide catalog, a museum-style catalog of about 130 objects, which are the result of a project that was initiated at the British Museum it started in 2016. It was meant to be a field collection project. The museum in London, as you may know, houses one of the biggest collections of Egyptian artifacts outside Egypt. I don't know if you've seen in the beginning of November this very messianic inauguration of the Grand Egyptian Museum in Cairo, which is a 20+ year project. And that museum claims now, of course, to be the world's largest museum with a collection dedicated to a single civilization with 100,000 objects. However, the British Museum in London, within its collections, has about 100,000+ objects from Egypt and Sudan. But all of it is mostly from basically pre-modern Egypt, so antiquity all the way. There are things that come all the way to about maybe the 16th, 17th century or so on, but they would be placed probably in other departments like coins and medals or Coptic or Islamic / Middle East galleries and departments. However, yeah, the museum has a massive collection from Egypt, but it doesn't have anything from modern Egypt. And basically what happened is that the museum had a bit of an identity crisis when the 2011 revolution happened. And they realized that since 60% of, this is an actual statistic, over 60% of the British Museum's visitors go specifically to see the Egyptian collection. But a very different Egypt was present on everybody's telephone and laptops to follow the news of the revolution, and the museum had nothing to show for it. They had nothing in their collection to tell a story about modern Egypt. So this is basically how the project started. Of course, Egypt has a long history of being represented within the British imperial context, most notably, maybe as a starting point, is at the Great Exhibition in 1851 at the Crystal Palace, which was an opportunity to showcase the fruits of industry. However, within that context, Egypt was represented by the designers of the exhibit with these colossal replicas of Egyptian statues and the sphinxes, and there were quite a few other grand displays, all focused on ancient Egypt. Egypt as a country, as a state, was present as an exhibitor. However, its exhibit was much more humble, and that was by design. While the main interest of the organizers of the exhibit was to showcase the latest technology, the curator of the Egyptian exhibit that was funded by the Egyptian state had a totally different approach. And in that context, created a set of vignettes like this one that showcase elements that he thought were essential to Egyptian life. And we know the name of the curator as Captain Abdel Hamid. So he is someone who is somehow affiliated with the military establishment, but was also curating this exhibit. And in the catalog, we see a list of about 391 items that were included. And these include raw materials. They include, things like petrified wood, rose water, weights out of brass, just materials that are gathered from across the country many of which were basically essentially raw materials. So that was an interesting contrast for me to discover how there were sort of two Egypts present in London in 1851, and then to find myself in Captain Abdel Hamid's position 150 years later, being asked to represent Egypt through a selection of objects that can represent modern Egypt. So of course, this raises a lot of questions as to what is modern, like when does it start and when does it end, and what defines an object as being modern. And of course, what is Egypt, given modernity being a very kind of networked and global economic system in which, you know, an object in Egypt in a certain moment in time in the 20th century could actually have bits and pieces in its assembly that come from different contexts. So besides those questions, I also had to be concerned with a couple of things. Myself as an Egyptian, and in fact, the only curator in the museum's history as an Egyptian. They've never, despite having the British Museum, by the way, started with an Egyptian collection. That was the origin collection that then around which the British Museum was built. But it never in its history, despite its massive collection and how important Egypt is to its own institutional history, they've never hired an Egyptian curator. Which is pretty wild to me that I'm finding myself in that kind of odd position. On the one hand, very critical of the institution as an Egyptian, knowing its history and its relationship to Egypt, but on the other hand, having to represent Egypt in one way or another with a very small budget. The whole project initially had a £20,000 British pound budget, and that included, you know, for not just collection and field work, but also like things like travel within the country. And I even used that budget for the documentation, which I'm very grateful that I did, because otherwise I wouldn't have the photographs of the objects that I will show you today, some of which you can see here. Essentially what I had to also deal with is the reality of Egypt today, which is a very surveilled, paranoid sort of security state, which is mostly operating as a sort of guardian of a plantation that's owned by someone else. So even though as an Egyptian American operating in Egypt, I was constantly under watch. And that's part of the reality that we have to live with. And then on top of that, there are all these rules and regulations. You know, it's very, you know, the illicit transfer and movement of ancient antiquities is a massive business. A lot of it goes through Dubai and gets laundered with fake paperwork and then gets sold to antique dealers and private collections and museums. But when it comes to collecting things like this, in my own kind of given who I am, you know, I'm not a wealthy antiquity dealer or art dealer or something like this. You know, I had to deal with a lot of restrictions as to what I can buy to export outside of the country to a museum. So between these kind of factors, and then the massive challenge of having to represent Egypt through a set of objects, basically, I'm just trying to paint for you the conditions within which this project had to evolve. So the work started in 2016, and immediately after I started the collecting process, I did this display in a storefront, an empty storefront in downtown Cairo, where the first set of objects were put on display. Essentially, one of the challenges of working on material culture for a museum, looking at both the recent history of humanity in general, but specifically countries that are sort of on the periphery of narratives of modernity, like Egypt, which is very bizarre since it's actually very central, means that there's very little tangible narrative and history. A lot of things were created not to be remembered. And a lot of things, as we move progressively to the present, become more ephemeral and basically impossible to pin down. It's very odd. As mass production increases, the memory of things decreases, since they become very sort of single-use items, for example, that are just thrown away. And also the materiality of things, as things have progressed towards the present, totally conflict with what museums, especially big museums like the British Museum, are prepared to deal with. So, for example, plastics have been a huge part of our material culture as a human civilization, as just every society basically since the middle of the 20th century. However, until now, museums are very reluctant to collect plastic items, especially museums like the British Museum, which have a mandate to maintain their collection in perpetuity, as they say, forever, whatever that means. And they know that plastic was never made to last forever. So therefore, a cheap plastic item, like perhaps this radio that you can see here, might be cheap to acquire relatively, but they think sort of forward into time and realize that this is a material that will disintegrate and crack and be, you know, change color with time, and so therefore it's kind of like something they would prefer to avoid. So that's another restriction that one has to think about when thinking about how do we document and put in a museum context the sort of material culture, the technological, the products of the technological changes that we've witnessed as a human society in the last century. So the collection grew to about 1,000 items. There was another display that I should show, two other displays that were done on the project early on. This is at the British Museum. You can see this window. It has it had 10 objects, all having to do with the theme of literacy. I'll talk a bit about some of these maybe if I have time, but just to show you the context, you know, this is the window right here in this grand hall that's mostly stone monumental works from ancient Egypt. So you can see kind of the irony of having very little space to exhibit modernity, which is basically our life today, in contrast to the distant ancient past and these stone objects that dominate the representation of Egypt in a European museum. The other display that was done was a room this time. So one time it was a window, this time it was a room. And here there was about 30 odd objects. I can't remember exactly the number, maybe 33 or something like that. And the theme that for the curatorial sort of concept of this particular room was to think about how, because it's in the British Museum where ancient Egypt is very present, how ancient Egyptian imagery was deployed for branding modern products and contemporary sort of products in modern Egypt. And this is something that you find a lot throughout the project, the items that I collected. So for example, even early in the 20th century, these are cigarette boxes. You know, tobacco as an industry was massive in Egypt. In fact, it's out of Egypt that a lot of tobacco products then became popular in Europe and then the US. Camel is the first packaged cigarette brand that was kind of mass produced in the US, and it's Camel because it needed to reference Egypt since luxury cigarettes were associated with Egypt. But in Egypt itself, these kind of boxes, which I found so many of different brands and companies and factories, always used an ancient image on the front and then a modern image on the back. And the modern image on the back would be usually the factory itself. So this is the factory where these cigarettes were made. And then these would be exported in addition to being consumed in Egypt. And we're talking about consumption in the millions, by the way, as early as the late 19th century. Egyptians are heavy smokers. I guess they have always been. I'll just go through some random objects that I think might interest you in the context of the conversation and the program of this event. For example, things as fundamental as how did the Arabic language get mechanized or basically turned into a typed language instead of a written language. We have no published history, no widely accepted known history. At least when I started the project in 2016, I realized that there was basically a big black hole in our knowledge as to when Arabic entered this kind of format. And then finding items like this, which are themselves as sort of technological artifacts, and then asking questions as to where did this come from, how was it made, who made it. A lot of frontiers for research open up, and then some other people then picked up some of these questions and actually delved into the topic. So for example, this typewriter was produced in the 1910s, up until the 1920s, was actually made by several manufacturers. This particular one was made by a manufacturer in Syracuse, New York, which is very interesting because that manufacturer said that they were willing to translate new inventions for other languages, new typewriter inventions. Just basically a language like Arabic can't just simply use the existing patent, for example, for a Latin-based typewriter. It needed a whole new design, almost from scratch. And that's because Arabic has letters that look very different in the beginning, middle, and the end of the word sometimes. And so there had to be a whole sort of redesign of the machinery. And this particular machine, which has this beautiful handwritten script in gold at the top, identifies it as a writing machine Egypt. And it says so because it was actually used to modernize the bureaucracy by the Egyptian state and, of course, private businesses as well. They bought it. So instead of handwritten documents and receipts and letters, this is when we start to see Arabic typed for official use. And it's a pretty heavy piece of machinery. I just find it very interesting that the manufacturing capacity to create one of the earliest kind of buying this in the early 20th century is basically like buying a car today. It wasn't a cheap piece of technology to have, and it had to be made in this particular factory in Syracuse, New York. There was another factory in the UK that also worked with non-Latin letters. So, for example, Hebrew had the same sort of journey to turn it into a typed language. And then I found out, for example, that there was a whole legal battle between the inventors, both Egypt-based. I think one was Lebanese and the other one was Egyptian. And since Egypt didn't have sort of patent laws for new inventions at the time that were good enough, they had to fight these legal battles in courts in London and in New York. And then you have the machine itself made in New York, and it's all to modernize Egyptian bureaucracy. I just found this kind of networked history of different geographies to produce this machine, this object, really interesting. And we would find this in simpler objects as well. So, for example, since smoking was such a big part of the culture, there's different ways of consumption. So it's not just the cigarette boxes like this, but sometimes it's something like this, which is for domestic space. So you would buy the product in a tin box, most likely, and then if you're a fancy household, you would line it up in a wooden box like this to offer your guests cigarettes when they come home to visit. And so this was a whole other set of objects that basically I didn't even know existed. That you can do probably a whole book on just the material culture of tobacco and smoking in Egypt. But these are just two examples, the packaging for how product was presented to consumers, and then how also it was presented by consumers to their guests in the context of a household like this. So this would have been in a pretty fancy upper class, let's say downtown Cairo household, which is where this was purchased. And what's interesting about it is that the carpentry of the box itself, since this was pretty high-end as an object, was imported from England. I don't know why, because Egypt has its own carpenters. However, the inlay, which could be anything from ivory to bone, was done in Egypt. And then at the bottom, there is a Swiss music machine, so that when you open the box, it makes music. So essentially, it's one object that would only make sense in an upper-class Egyptian household in the early 20th century. However, to make it, you have components from at least 3 different geographies. So that kind of story finds its way, I think, in this project in different aspects, it presents itself in different ways. So to go to something very low-tech, and as opposed to a fancy household, to think about the total opposite of a poor household, this was a very curious item, for example, that I found that would be completely outside the interest of basically any museum that I know, including the British Museum, or definitely any museum in Egypt would not be interested to think about something like this. However, this was quite common as an object. It's an assemblage, homemade oil lamp. And ironically, I learned when I found this and spoke to the people that I purchased it from, that this very low-tech, cheap oil lamp made out of reused parts like tin cans, for example, as you see here, was used in the very near vicinity of the Aswan High Dam, which was this sort of grand project to bring electricity and modernity to Egyptian cities. However, the reality is that most of the electricity went to the northern cities and to factories. And so the villages nearby around the dam did not have electricity for quite some time after. And until then, in the 60s and 70s, people were still using oil lamps. And if you were really poor, you made your own oil lamp. So I think objects like this kind of fracture a bit the standardized narratives about how technology and modernity changed societies and life, because it sort of presents a whole different perspective that contrasts with these official narratives. And the narratives are already quite skim. This is not a written history. This is not a history that already exists. If you look into the history of modern Egypt, for example, the focus is usually on textual documents for research. Almost very, very rarely do historians look at material culture, which is very odd because it's a period in which material culture proliferated with industrialization and mass production. So a lot of times I'm finding myself sort of really trying to write histories from scratch in order to create this guide, this catalog of objects. And things like for example, the entanglement of Western innovation with how actually these products and innovations ended up being spread around the world. I found that Egypt plays quite an interesting role. So for example, the telephone, very shortly after the invention of the telephone, we're talking about 3 years, the first telephone line was laid in Egypt between Cairo and Alexandria, and this was the work of diplomats, and American diplomats. And I found that this is a theme that is very much recurring, that, for example, if I go to the Instagram page that I've created for the book, basically I'm putting everything, the entire catalog on this Instagram page for now, to make it fully accessible. The book should have really been out this year. However, unfortunately, with the current politics and just bizarre way publishing and museums are thinking and working in the current politics, things got stalled, unfortunately. But to go back to this connection of diplomacy and innovation, one of the interesting stories that I discovered, for example, is transistor. And somebody had mentioned earlier in the presentations today, transistor radio and radio waves and how they could be used in one way or another. I myself was just watching something last night about how Wi-Fi networks that we all have at home allow for very easy spying to basically track the physical mapping of a space. I had no idea that that's even possible. But transistor radios, when they were spread I'm almost done. When they were spread very early on after their invention, they actually came to places like Egypt through diplomacy. And this is a theme that you can find from everything to, from the radio to television, for example, which became popular in Egypt by the state in the 1960s, which was at the time, official narratives would say was a socialist kind of non-aligned state. However, RCA, the American company, is the one that brought this technology to Egypt and made television possible, which of course has been a very fundamental cornerstone to propaganda in Egypt. And I'll show you an example before I close. In 1982, when Israel withdrew from the Sinai Peninsula after it had it occupied since 1967, Egyptian state TV did a joint broadcast with Israeli TV. Such a thing would not have been possible without this technology and without the proliferation of television devices made by the Nasser regime and putting it into every household, basically by the 1970s and 80s. Just to close, I made this web project a couple of years ago, and so a lot of basically what I'm doing now is I'm uploading the full guide bit by bit into this Instagram page, but it will also be part of this website, timeline.com, which is trying to basically look at a different way of reading history through art, architecture, and design, but not so much art, but really more architecture and design, and then related things. And it's sort of like Wikipedia, but visually connected. So the lines here connect. Basically, if something started and ended at in certain dates, That's what the line would connect. And so you can filter up here what is visible. So you can see only buildings, institutions, publications, and they would be mostly the focus right now is on Middle East and Latin America, which is where I'm based. And then objects here will be populated with basically the entire catalog once I finish uploading everything on Instagram. And hopefully the book will be printed and come out soon before the world comes to an end. Thank you.
Thank you. That's fantastic. I just saw Selena also just joined. And if any of you have questions, feel free to ask. Yeah, Jenna, you want to speak up?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I mean, thank you so much for organizing the symposium and also the speech, but I just wanted to ask if it's possible to reach out to you afterwards to discuss the Al Imara magazine a bit further. That was your latest post on the Instagram.
Yes.
And on my research, I'm very interested in this magazine. So
I would love that. Please do. Please, everybody, talk to me. Yes, let's do it.
okay, so I will just write you on Instagram and then we can exchange information.
Yeah, sounds good.
Thank you so much. Great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's also related to Selena. Mohamed was mentioning the transmitters, how it's relating to Egyptian diplomacy and the colonial context. So that's also a broadening up. I think today we didn't cover it that much, but it's obviously within the theme itself, right? And the next one, Fatemeh, I think she will also follow this topic. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hi. Hi, everyone. Sorry, I'm like the last one, and I'm trying to keep it really small and short because I'm also traveling and my internet is a bit slow. But so at the first, I wanted to show a video. It's like 2 minutes, and the sound is not really important. And after, I would start off with like a short part, some lines from a book, and then I would start my presentation. So And yet men remained oblivious to the enigma of woman's displacement. They presumed women to be possessed, objects they could carry with them wherever they pleased, unaware that these women had left their hearts behind, their spirit lingering beyond the mountains, far from deserts, displaced, bewildered, and true mourners. To me, the nomadic women appeared in my sense to be the truest exiles, for their souls and minds had been torn apart from their beings. These lines were from Ego Monster, which is originally in Farsi, and I translated with help of my Afghan friend Mohamed, by Bahauddin Majruh, who is amazing philosopher, theoretian, and novelist, Afghan, and he was murdered in the US when he was on exile. The reason I started my presentation with his word, it's because the way he's writing about diasporic body and Afghan immigration is really amazing and sensitive. And today I really want to talk mostly about like how we can working with the community and establishing a research with is it's like a form of like effective labor. I am borrowing this word from Fred Moulton in the book Under Common, and then I will start with I'm going to start with actually like the umbrella title of my project, Frequency of Grief. Frequency of Grief started in 2024 when I was on encampment in Syracuse University. I was hosting for 4 years at Food Tent. I tried to be anonymous because of being international student. I was wearing mask during that 4 days, and that was the closest experience of keeping my sorrow and grief to the way that I was grew up with it, and I had learned. I'm from Iran originally, and the way I actually grew up in like really like restricted and religious family, and for me, grief always been like sort of in conversation with spiritual and religious. But then this is because of like Shia, like sort of landscape of grief is really vast and is really ritualistic. And the first step of this project mostly was kind of exploring and researching on ritualistic gatherings in Persian Shiite like culture. But then after the experience of encampment, me and my friend Don Valinsky, who is amazing artist and also mostly work on mutual aid and communal kitchen, her project Flake Kitchen, now she's running in central New York. We decided to work on a form of communal kitchen as a classroom, and Frequency of Grief has started to be a space for kind of grieving and making food together. We decided to work with a student at University of Michigan. When we suggested to work with them, we both knew that we are not going to work in a classroom. So I asked them if is there any other places to just considering as a classroom, and they offered us so many spots, and which was the dining on campus. So we made 4 classes with all the students, mostly international, because that class was part of the syllabus of food and sustainability on campus, and we worked with them to make a recipe, like multiple recipes that they were like a vessel for our griefs. During this session, we made dolma, which is like a kind of skin, which was from cabbage and the stuffing. And we also had chives that kind of like bundle everything together. We mostly would just working on our stuff and we asked people, we encouraged people not talking a lot, and we had people would join online and offering a frequency to the space. And after 4 hours of making dolma, at the end we had the time to eat together and process the 4 hours. The first iteration of frequency of grief really was helping me to kind of establishing the second one, which was mostly like an installation. The second one was commissioned by the curatorial group with ISB with me, that I couldn't make the fully version of the work. So I kind of like, I found myself like in sort of like sensory landscape that I had experienced before. And by that time, I think like the project hasn't like shaped as a research. It was mostly like a visual like practice that I decided to really break it down for myself. So I made the installation, but after the Whitney curatorial didn't let me to bring my brought my in like performer, so I decided to took everything down, and I decided to get back to Iran. And that was, I think, like the most important part of my research. So the research started to just wandering and walking for like hours in Tehran. And that I got back and I found like everything has changed. And after like 1 month, I got back to Tehran, the war happened, like the 12 days war. And me and a group of people decided to have a reading group. The book of, sorry for like the sound, the sound escape. I'm in Istanbul, and every like 2 hour you might hear like azan, which is interesting. But yeah, I'm talking about like the reading group that we established. During the reading group, we decided to read the book Mashrub and the End of the World for Anna Singh. And that made me really think about the project that I did with ISB, the second iteration. And I told myself, this is not going to be like just a performance or even like an installation. Should be a school. So the group of people that I was reading the book with them, I talked with one of my friends, Tannaz Mutmain, that she is originally from Bandar Lenge, which is south of Iran. And that's like a really like small village, and all the people there are immigrants from either Africa, or it's like a small community, black community of Iran still living there, or part of them come from Gulf countries. It's like a small group of like Sunni in Iran. There are other Sunnis like in Kurdistan and also like Azari part of Iran, but like there are a bit different in like practicing. So she suggested me working on like rituals like Zar, which is like a really intimate and private form of ritual that usually local people would like keep it up, and it's private, not anyone can join. And so it's about like possessed body, is about jinn, and it comes with a wind in your body, and there is like it's really similar to like the way in Haiti like the community would do, like keep up like sort of ritual for voodoo, and Maya Duran like speaking and like working on it. And I have worked on my research about with like Maya Duran like documentary and also her book. So the idea of a school was semi part of like frequency of grief and our conversation during about Zar and about the ritual around Zar. So the title in Farsi is خاک من گل شود و گل شکفت از گل من, which I really don't want to translate it to English. So for the English version, we come up with the title of Fragile Ground, a communal dinner for the brokenhearted. There were like 5 sessions. The first session, we actually draw all our thoughts about food, about all the insecurity around food, about like the new like food landscape that we're experiencing after the war and like new wave of sanctions after a snapback. That I think like we have talked a lot like during this like symposium about the crisis. But I think like we've been experiencing this crisis, like every minute crisis, like especially after the war, like all the we are living with our news. Like it's not like we decide to like turn off everything. We have to like really like be cautious about like our surrounding. And so we talk, we draw, and we try to like kind of like exercising and practicing with our hands, and also speculating about like what is the kitchen site for us, what is the figure, the ghost in the kitchen, and what are the words and what is the lexicon for it. And then in the second session, we had a guest lecturer, Erfan, who has been working at as a baker in multiple like restaurant and bakeries, and he taught us to make our yeast. It was really interesting that we didn't know that like mostly for like making a starter and a like mother yeast, you should choose like a feminine name for the yeast, because it's kind of like giving that a spiritual like sort of like energy to not get mold. And we scale everything, mix everything, and then we ask people who join to the school to kind of like monitor and like write down everything about like the yeast over the 10 days that we're gonna have like our second session. And at the same time, we decided to stitching together, because every session had a really unique and specific sort of like keywords. The second one was about stitching and making, and also speculating about tools that we would have in the kitchen, or like, do we want to make any tools or like adding any tools to it. And it was kind of like sad because none of us could like take care of our yeast, and they all got mold. And we brought our molded yeast, and we made a dough with it, and we played with dough. We decided to like have 3 hours playing with dough and like kind of sort of venting, because the first 2 sessions, me and Tanaz decided to not asking about like the background, the artistic background of every participant. Like what you have done, like what are like the exhibition that you have had. We decided to just trying to like experiencing the companionship, kind of embodying like the being together, like making a ground, which was the most important part of like this school. For us, the ground was, for me at least, was the sofre. Sofre or dostarkhan is like a really amazing, flexible sort of like piece of like fabric or like fabric cloth, that it's really like unique to like as part of like an important like tool in the kitchen in Iran and like in Central Asia and also Afghanistan. There's different form of like sofre, but we specifically wanted to work in like more foldable and like fabric based, because there are some with like even wood or like bamboo that they're like braiding together. It's mostly like in north of Iran. And so we decided to thinking about like what is the ground for us when we are like playing with the dough, and we knew we are not going to eat the dough. So I asked everyone to find this place for the dough, to put it there, and like kind of like monitoring over the week to see if any other like non-human species would eat it or like grab part of it, or is it gonna make like a sort of like ecosystem for any non-human. And it was interesting because they captured so many photos. They gave us so many photos from like other animals and species that they kind of like birds, cats, even one cat like pee on my dough, which was kind of sad. And then the session after that, it was it came across with the anniversary of like Jina uprising. It was on September 16th. So I decided to we should go to a walk and kind of like talking about like the experience of like uprising, the experience of like how our body is trying to like being in Tehran with new life that we're experiencing. As you know, until like 2023, all women had to wear hijab in Iran. And after September 16, when Jina Amini was murdered on custody of morality police, people started to like chanting Zan Zandagi Azadi, women life freedom, and they took off their scarves. And after that, it became as a resistance. So we decided to go to the nature, which is around Tehran. And we noticed, we talked about like the ecological landscape, about the grief as part of like this landscape. There is no rain. There is no like every day we are talking about like the pollution. We are talking about like there are so many other stuff that like fruits, like vegetables, like seeds that they are not existing anymore, or like that they would export to Russia or China. And then during that walk, we had like a deep listening process that we decided to touch everything like deeply and listening to like the rock, like the air, everything. And for the food for that day, Fatemeh, one of the member, decided to give us a prompt to make oatmeal. And so we ate like all oatmeal, and we decided to working on our recipes for the last session. The last session, we made recipes based on one tool and one like recipe, one material, like something that we would like provide really easily. And we made this like small zine map recipe, and we decided to invite all the people to our communal kitchen. This is like the English version. This is like the Farsi version that we did, and we made like a foldable zine. And this is the English version that I made for this presentation. There are so many stuff that you can see. For example, Kiana made like fried chicken fillet that she had like a really unique story with it. Everyone tried to like bring like a sort of a story, like personal narrative to it. And then we made for the ground that we have talked about, we made tumushi, which is really interesting, or litak, or like it also has like other names, but tumushi is mostly like common in Hormozgan area. They call it tumushi because it fits into the hand, and they can like kind of like guiding on the really hot pan to make like a really thin sort of a skin wipe like bread. And they usually put mahyawe, which is like a fermented fish sauce. And Tannaz brought us like the pan, and like also like gave us like a sort of demo of like making it. And all of us brought our recipe, and we decided to make like a composition of everything on one bread. So Tannaz would make one of the bread, and we would have like a lineup of people like making their tumushi. And we encouraged people to share together, because it was about companionship. It was telling our story. It was telling the story of the school. And it was kind of like embodied all the grief, all the conversation, all even like the disagreement and objection that we would have like during the school. And that experience was really unique by itself for me, because it gave me like a sort of like more wanting to explore, and like seeing walks, and even like daily conversation, or like kind of like talking, like that, those fragmentation as part of the research, and seeing like it's important to like reading those like really important like source for myself, but also like that like participatory form of like working with the community and making a grassrooted community with people. It was really important for me to making like that sort of like keywords and wanting to experiencing and like traveling around for like a slow cooking sort of research. And in the process of the research, I found so many interesting like sort of presentation that people starting to like capture and documenting that those like form of like preservation. For example, this is like a sort of like tandoor making in more east of Iran, that they're like making a ratio of wool, straw, and mud, and making the tandoor. And this form of tandoor, it's like predominantly made by men, but like it's like actually working for women because it's coming from the ground to the coming up. And it's usually for men in Iran is like for the baker is like usually in the wall, the tandoor. But this is like a sort of like they are making it. It's usually takes like months because they should make the first layer and then keep it to dry and then add to it. Or there is like another interesting sort of like food preservation. Yeah, this is like a different also like form of this is not tomoshi, but it's really close. But this is also a really interesting tandoor format, like really like DIY form of tandoor. That also stemming on the bread. And this is mahyave and some sort of oil. Uh, and this is also really interesting bread from Khorasan, which is really close to like border of Afghanistan.
Just a reminder that we maybe will jump to the roundtable soon, or if you're
Yeah.
comfortable with wrapping up soon. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, these are like sort of like
Oh, I think okay. Yeah, I think she accidentally left the meeting. Maybe she will join. If not, I can start to share the video of the next speakers. It's Monica and Natalia. They are both. Sorry, Fatemeh. I think you accidentally left the meeting, so we are moving forward. If you want to say something and discuss, we can have a roundtable after that. It's actually a bit long, so and this symposium will be longer than expected. And if you want to chat, you can also put your thought in the box below. I don't think I can play it. Let's just start the roundtable, yeah? If that's okay with you. Maybe you want to share more with Selena and Mohamed, maybe three of you want to comment on each other's work, or you find some commonality in your research. It's very interesting, I think. Yeah, feel free, the floor is yours.
I mean, I think maybe to move away from the specific topics, we can talk also about this aspect of the environment that we work. For example, Fatemeh mentioned feeling censored, and I think different people have different experiences on this theme. Maybe it's a good opportunity to discuss some of these realities around the actual work that we do. So if anybody wants to jump on that, share your experiences. I mean, I have a lot, but I'm curious.
Yeah, you can start to share.
Yeah, if you've, I mean, this question of censorship and the limitations of expression and these projects where they sort of hit dead ends, I think would be very interesting to discuss as a group.
True. I don't know, Selena, if you're here. I'm super interested in your experience. Maybe you are from Belgrade, and then now working on the proto-history of AI. Probably she's busy with other things at the moment. But yesterday, for example, we had a whole group of
Do you hear me?
architects. Yes, yes.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I had to move places during the symposium, so I maybe made some noises unintentionally in some time before, and just wanted to react to your prompt about the situation in Belgrade, yes, and in general, like the problem of censorship. I mean, I don't. It's a very large topic, and I don't want to expand on it now. But I wanted to say that I realized, like, with the comments that I made in the introduction about the crisis of imaginary and the crisis of work, like we are experiencing this crisis of work, which is very interestingly noted by the Data Workers Project. So this has nothing to do directly with Belgrade, but I think with places that are in crisis, there are increasingly like problematic, or this kind of censorship is also a way that the social media machine and AI sort of remain productive. So lots of data have to be removed for the kind of comfort of general users. And so in Data Workers Inquiry, the Dyer Institute in Berlin, or partnering with, I think, Weizenbaum Institute in Berlin, they have, and I invite you to just explore this database. They have a report of people who work on cleaning data and annotating data in context of any precarious work, not just annotating as an uncomfortable practice, but also where people have to like remove data about the genocide that they are actually sort of subject to, not at the same time, but while in a refugee camp. So, you know, that is a perspective that is important to keep in mind. And that is the kind of work that AI is creating. You know, it's not that we are all getting more free. And also it's not that we are just getting our art less compensated for, but it is that there are like new types of exploitation beyond work, beyond time and energy, but as emotional exploitation that is very directly linked to AI. I also invite people to follow the situation in Belgrade because it's interesting. It's like very near the center of Europe, let's say, and there's like huge oppression happening at the moment, and a new attack on free media and a protest that is running for 1 year. So yeah, my solidarity with that.
But from my end, like, and my experience about censorship, I think like working with the community, it's bring like a sort of like responsibility and ethics that sometimes like this sort of like censorship is not like external. Sometimes you really, like when I was working on like making like the presentation for today, I was like, I don't want to share some of the photos from the classes, or like even like I noticed that I didn't like really capture any photos from so many moments because I wanted to keep those like ephemeral, especially after the experience of like having like the work in the institution and seeing like how they want to like kind of like reducing them to like just aesthetic. And you know, like when you're working with the community, as I said, like is really affective flavor, is really emotional. It's not just about your personal thing because you are trying to like building that trust and like, and it's hard to keep up that like even like simple sort of ethics and among those people. And it's not just like a frame of like photo, which is kind of like also important to not explicit anything about like the frame of photo or like a video footage, but like that like sort of like a live connection, it's hard to like document it.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you said. Also, before when we were discussing about the core principle for ETENS, and you also suggested some ethics rules that we should follow. For example, for different language, if it's gonna be more accessible if you are running an international group, and especially if it's gonna be remote, and most of the time is we will communicate through language. But also luckily that most of us we are creative, so we have other tools like image or sound, and we are all happy to see even food itself. I think it's super nice that you are creating this thing. And I also have a question for Mohamed.
Yes.
That I know you from like last time in Paris. I saw you give a presentation in the Institute of Idea for Columbia University. I wonder in your personal journey if there's a moment that you feel belonging to a community, either to scholars or historians or artists, and if you have imagination to a community you want to belong to, and how would you foresee that be?
Oh man, that's a funny question because I feel immediately when you were speaking then just now, the word that kept flashing in my mind is you're an exile, you're an exile. You know, I feel like I'm an exile in every way. You know, for example, in Paris, it was. I mean, obviously, I felt very privileged because I had this opportunity and this space, but it was also a kind of a horrendous experience because the genocide started, and the same week the genocide started, I've been in the middle of this targeting that's been happening for some time, very dangerous stuff, honestly, that I have had to survive, and it's been part of this counter-revolution situation that's happening in the Middle East. Unfortunately, I think I just got in somebody's bullseye. And so between the counter-revolution forces in the Middle East, which basically if somebody doesn't like you, they can just add you on a list and then suddenly you're blackmailed or you're blacklisted. Or so the same week the genocide started, when I was in Paris, I received threatening letters from Beverly Hills lawyers, and the institutions received the same letters. So basically I was dealing with this event that's global in a way, in the middle of people who don't want to talk about it, and they just want to carry on as if nothing is happening because everybody feels very, you know, this kind of privileged American university context. It's very bizarre to me because you don't really talk about the real world. I feel like you're always talking about the world through some kind of reflection, but never about the thing itself. It's always an oblique view or something. Like you can't just talk about reality. You always have to dance around it to be politically correct and to not tell them, you know, this type of thing. I'm like, okay, well, it's also not very politically correct to ignore that there's thousands of people being bombed, you know, like, and I was the only Mohamed in the situation, and that's always a burden. My name is quite a burden in many ways. Unfortunately, it's very ironic always to find myself kind of, you know, someone with the most common name in the world, but always the outsider in the room, as if there's nobody else, you know. And sort of I get to carry the burden of everything the name represents to people. in those communities. So I always feel like an exile, even when I'm invited to a space. You know, we spent 9 months in Paris in this very, very cushy, bougie fellowship. Not one conversation about what was happening. Not one, never. It was absurd. It was the most absurd thing ever. And even when I asked the university to recommend a therapist so I can go and maybe speak with someone, they sent me to, you know, but you know, this is the reality, and I'm just describing what happened. They suggested someone, and I went, and I realized that I was sitting in front of a New York Zionist. So it was very difficult. I was just like, oh my God, even therapy that I have to pay for, I have to dance around, you know, like this is the reality. And on top of that, you know, my work itself got sidelined. I mean, I'm very privileged again to have the opportunity, and I ended up finishing a lot of the thinking. And this was a very difficult project, really, from beginning to end in some ways. And when I started it, I never thought it would consume my life, but it kind of did. Because it was supposed to be a short-term project. But, you know, I got very seriously harassed in Egypt because of my involvement with the British Museum. And then I found myself in exile without planning it. And I ended up in Mexico for safety. And then this followed me here into Mexico, this harassment. And then, you know, when I had a break in Paris, it was like that. So I had a little bit of money for a year, but then I also had to deal with the psychological pressure of feeling like the world is collapsing and feeling like an outcast, even though I feel like I'm a pretty nice person. But, you know, that's just life, I guess, that's been scripted for me. And so it's been a very spiritual experience, actually, because that's how you can survive this craziness. You know, you have to either collapse under these kinds of pressures, or you develop spiritually, because that's the only really support and protection I was able to find. So it's been difficult to find a community, because also we live in a very anti-spiritual culture globally. So the only outlet that I found to maintain my sanity in the middle of these, basically, I think, insane situations, is also kind of seen as not welcomed. So yeah, so the exile is not just physical, it's intellectual, it's emotional, it's financial, it's you know, it's layered, and exile just feels like the condition that I have to live with, unfortunately. Or maybe fortunately, because I did learn a lot from it, but I wish life didn't have to be so hard.
Yeah, true. I've been following your social media since last time you were in Paris, maybe 2 years ago. And also, they're one of the audience. I think he's one of also historian student researching about Egypt, and he also traveled to Egypt, etc. But also during your presentation, maybe he asked some question about the situation what's happening there. But as you mentioned, it's difficult to talk about it. I have a friend. Currently, I'm in Belgium, in Brussels. I have a friend. He's on also exile in the refugee system. I don't know what's your opinion on this kind of system provided by the Geneva Convention that people can.
Horrendous. It's horrendous. I'm sorry. I mean, I lost a friend, a refugee from Sudan, and of course, you know, the genocide in Sudan has not received as much attention as Palestine, but it has been quite awful. And this is something that's been happening for really building up for decades in different ways, you know, since before the partition of Sudan into 2 countries, which actually I learned very recently is a plan that existed like 100 years ago. This idea of splitting up Sudan, you know, between British imperialists and Zionists. They have a whole different map for the Middle East, and part of it was actually this whole thing, North and South Sudan thing. But in any case, I knew a refugee in Egypt from Sudan for about maybe 8 years, and we stayed in touch even after I got to Mexico. And through the UN refugee program, him and his family, wife and 3 kids, were moved, funny enough, to Syracuse, New York, which is what I mentioned today, where the typewriter was made 100 years ago. 4 months later, he disappeared.
Oh no!
And,
what happened?
well, I have no idea, but obviously watching what ICE is doing, this basically bizarre kind of almost terrorist organization that's official, with masks and robbing people off the street. I'm imagining horrible things happen to him and his family. And, you know, so this is someone who was sent to the US through a refugee program after being a refugee in Egypt for I don't know how long, I guess in total, maybe it was at least a decade in a suspended state, you know. These are really beautiful, rich people in terms of humanity, and they're really put through the ringer. And the refugee system is just like, to me, after what happened to him, I just see it as part of the mechanism of human trafficking, because that's what ICE is doing. It's human trafficking dressed in masks and with a uniform or whatever. And so, yeah, I think the refugee system is a disaster. I mean, first of all, the creation of refugees, and then the states these people are expected to survive in, and then you move them around. I mean, here is a Sudanese from the Nile suddenly moved to snow-covered Syracuse, New York, already not a very nice situation, with no money and no language, and then 4 months later disappears. Like, I don't know what that is. So of course, you know, I don't have very nice things to say about the system, because I find myself, I mean, in exile, I find myself almost like, I feel like a sort of refugee in Mexico. And it's been very difficult to explain to Mexicans why I'm here, because everybody's suspicious these days. So you're always looked at as kind of like, what are you really doing here? I'm like, oh, surviving? I don't know.
It was really interesting that you were talking about your experience of like feeling that you're a refugee in Mexico, because I think I also, like, after I got back from the US, I was living in Syracuse for like 4 years. So when you mentioned about Syracuse, it was like such a coincidence. But when I got back to Iran, everyone's like, especially after the war, they were like, why you get back? Like, why you are here? And I felt really like as a refugee in Iran, because like in my home country, I was like, I cannot explain about it because it's really difficult, especially after October 7, everything. And so like I should mention, like half of the country cannot even like understand like the genocide in Palestine because of like regime in Iran and like the supported propaganda machine of like regime. So it's basically the sense of like being an exile, or like being even like a sort of like, even like being tourist in your home country is like really new experience of like these days as well for me.
I had that experience too. Yeah. I mean, when I lived in Egypt, I already was living as someone who immigrated when I was younger and returned. So I almost felt like a tourist for some time, and then the revolution was happening, you know, and so like I returned 3 months before the revolution of 2011. So after not living in the country for 15 years, suddenly I'm in the middle of these protests, and there's people being run over, and there's rubber bullets. It's like, oh, so it's like both a tourist of the revolution and a tourist of my own country that I left when I was younger. So not quite a refugee in that sense, but an outsider still, because everybody kind of sees you as, oh, you're one of those people that left and came back, which also, by the way, raises a lot of suspicion in a paranoid state. And it was under Obama that he canceled any privileges that dual citizens have. So suddenly you become kind of, with the revolution, everybody was assuming that, you know, you must have an agenda, and this was part of the propaganda of the state about the revolution, that it was people outside, or, you know, like things like, and this is, I think, how I got caught up in the middle of all of this anti-counter-revolution stuff, which is basically funded by the UAE mostly, which is also responsible for the genocide in Sudan. You know, it's all kind of connected in this way, and they're all connected to the Zionists project, and then the US, of course. So yeah, it's been kind of bizarre to be in the middle of all of this, both as an outsider, kind of visitor, tourist in your own country, but then having to be that same condition and wherever you go kind of situation, and then try to write all this material and work and do research. Yeah, it's been interesting.
I guess research itself and writing is like a therapy for you. And do you also see a future of like where the writing is gonna lead you to, for example, join a symposium like this, or yeah, do you see what do you expect for the future if there's a post-humanitarian infrastructure that we dare to even think of?
Yeah, I love this framework of post-humanitarian future. I mean, I think symposiums like this, and I'm very grateful for your invitation. Kind of break the trend a bit that we experience, because essentially everybody wants to be very safe and comfortable. And so they avoid, if unfortunately, it's like we're watching these atrocities happening, but then when you share personal stories and it has a face, people don't want to listen, actually. And they project a lot of things on the witness who is speaking about their experiences. It's almost kind of like people are willing to deal with like something like a genocide or a counter-revolution as an abstract kind of concept. But once it has individual stories and faces, especially if they want to speak back, people don't want to create space for that. Which has been very difficult. So inviting someone like me or Fatemeh, or just having this group and conversation allows at least for us to still exist, even if on a digital Zoom kind of Google platform. Yeah.
And Selena, you want to add on something? And Emma?
Well, yeah, a lot has been said, and I really want to say I really appreciate the opportunity to hear from everyone and to hear all these amazing perspectives and insights and the research people are doing. So thank you for sharing this. I mean, really, yeah, it's much beyond like a format that we need, but it's really like the kind of talk that we need to do. So I really, really appreciate this. And I'm happy to continue the conversation. I look forward to that.
Thank you. Emma, I saw you raise your hand.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for all your presentations. They were really, really lovely and very thoughtful roundtable talk right now. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate the whole symposium. I was watching on YouTube for some time, and I came back in this Google Meet, and I saw there's like a Read AI recording everything.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I used it in the past, and I know it's not a very, just a suggestion. Please don't take this with a grain of salt. It's like really pretty non-ethical company, and I would just advise to use something else next time. Just because, yeah, just wanted to give my 2 cents. But this was really lovely, and I'm looking forward to all of your future endeavors. Oh, I have to use a complicated word to close out my speech. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for this project today. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you also for the patience and for like giving everyone space, and yeah.
Of course, looking forward for our publication if we're gonna do it. Really looking forward to share the conversation in written text. I think that's gonna be amazing. And truly, I think from my perspective, I received education in Hong Kong, and for example, anthropology is so important, and people love to read stories. Even people who are in the, for example, in the hidden corners in society, etc. I think like personal stories is really the truest format to reflect on humanity.
Yes.
So I really encourage you that you continue to do that, and we will try to create more opportunities for everyone to continue to share stories. And thank you so much for today. Let's keep in touch.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Ciao. Have a nice
Bye.
day, nice evening. Bye.
Bye.